Hi, welcome to InFocus Recouched. We hope you're feeling kind of festive today because we've put together a bit of a Christmas-themed episode for you.
Yep, that's right. Coming up, we've got a very jazzy Christmas carol, some tips on how to have a long and healthy marriage, and a discussion on whether there's a war on Christmas, as some people claim.
Whoa, yeah. But first up, put a hold on your Christmas dinner menu until you've heard what Sue Rad has to say about that most misunderstood of dietary nutrients, gluten.
Happy Christmas, Sue. It's just a wonderful thing about Christmas. Hey, what are you eating at Christmas time? Are you going on a special diet, trying to maybe flatten your tummy or just look slim or look good? Have you noticed, Sue, how many people are on gluten-free or wheat-restrictive diets these days?
Absolutely, James. In fact, it seems to be an epidemic in Western countries at the moment to avoid these foods.
Yeah, no, I've been wondering, should I flatten my tummy by eating less wheat? Because that's what I read in a woman's magazine.
Well, actually, if you look at figures, say, from the US, this is serious business. $5 to $10 billion. That's how big the industry is. And in Australia, for example, at least 18% of people claim to be buying gluten-free containing foods.
That's between 10 or 20 out of every 100 people. They're eating wheat-restrictive diets. Now, tell us... what is it? What is a gluten-free diet? What's gluten?
Gluten is a type of protein found in certain grain foods, such as wheat, rye, and barley. And it's found in those grains, but also in a whole range of foods made from those grains. So if you think about it, it could be found in bread, biscuits, muffins, and many other such foods. So it's prevalent in the food supply.
Cakes, pastries. I mean, what's wrong with gluten?
Well, for some people who have a medically diagnosed condition such as celiac disease, gluten can be toxic to your gut. It actually destroys...
So it can be dangerous.
Absolutely, if you have a proper medical diagnosis. But the problem that we're seeing is that many people are self-diagnosing, believing that they have a problem with gluten, and therefore eliminating a whole bunch of nutritious foods, whereas the research is suggesting that it may not be the gluten that's triggering their symptoms. It may be something else found in those same foods.
Now, we were talking before and you said about 1% of people may have celiac disease, which requires a gluten-free diet.
For life.
But 17% are trying to restrict their gluten.
At least. And that's because often people feel better when they get rid of a lot of junk food, which also has gluten. But they may actually have something called irritable bowel syndrome. And for IBS, in fact, next time I come on, we'll be talking about the latest research to do with the low FODMAPs diet. The low FODMAPs diet is the way to go, not gluten.
So when you have IBS or irritable bowel syndrome or you've got tummy troubles, you just kind of find generally upset down there somewhere and you just want to self-diagnose, and if you're reading the magazines you think gluten-free, reduce my wheat,
and
feel
people
better.
Assume it's the gluten, but what they found is that the gluten and the FODMAPs occur in many of the same foods. But people know about gluten, have never heard of FODMAPs, and they assume if they cut out the gluten, it's the gluten. But the studies actually show if you cut out gluten, James, you could be, or gluten-containing foods, you could be doing more harm than good. Well, firstly, let's look at what else you could be eating instead. So many people will buy processed foods or ultra-processed foods in packets. Just because it's gluten-free doesn't mean it's healthy. A lot of these foods are highly refined. They're lacking in minerals such as iron and zinc, especially dietary fibre. So that's a really big issue.
So all these packaged foods, while they're gluten-free, these plain wafer fingers filled with lemon-flavoured cream... could be
still high in the GI, glycemic index, could be loaded with nasty
sugars.
fats, promote oxidation in the body or inflammation.
So
they're
fats
not
and sugars
necessarily
are gluten-free?
healthy. That's right.
Oh,
so it depends what you do eat. So what's really important, if you do have a medical diagnosis requiring you to be strictly gluten-free for life, you should learn how to make some whole foods from scratch, which are naturally gluten-free. So they're things like legumes, which we've talked about many times, or other types of grains or pseudo-grains such as quinoa or buckwheat or millet, even polenta. So these foods have very good effects on the bowel, on the gut flora. And this is where it gets really, really interesting. A really interesting study, it was a small study published in the British Journal of Nutrition, found that if you put people on a gluten-free diet just for 1 month, and then you collect their stool samples and you analyse their stools, what the researchers have shown is that there is a reduced amount of the good healthy bacteria in the gut, and there is a reduced immunity. So by excluding whole foods containing gluten, you may actually be
Reducing your immunity.
Reducing your immunity, and it's now saying that about 80% of the immunity in the body comes from the gut. So you've got to be really, really careful to really understand whether you need to exclude gluten. If you do exclude it, to consume other foods that will still help stimulate the growth of the good bacteria and keep the balance right.
So this is a beautiful corn here, gluten-free, I guess.
That's right. So all your vegetables and fruits are naturally gluten-free, so good for everyone. But really the key message is, if you suspect you've got tummy problems, go and see your doctor. You need to ensure that there is nothing else more serious going on, such as celiac disease, in which case you will need to go strictly gluten-free, but it may be that you just have irritable bowel, and gluten-free is not the treatment for irritable bowel. There is another approach which we'll talk about next time, which is very, very effective.
Well, while we're going to think about Christmas, I'm going to munch into this gluten-free piece of beautiful, fresh, raw corn. Cheers, folks.
Man, he cracks me up every time he takes a massive bite of whatever food Sue brings in.
I know. It sounded delicious, actually, that big, juicy crunch. And did you see the corn silk just all over his lap?
He's such a funny guy. We'll take a break now. Give us a moment. We'll be back in a minute.
We live our lives running around, rarely stopping to ask ourselves where we're going and what our final destination is. In the end, our lives become little more than routine. Step beyond and discover a path that offers comfort, love and hope. Visit hopeoffer.com/step beyond or call 1300 300 389 for your free copy today.
We're going to start with some soybeans. Use some chickpeas, an onion, you have a teaspoon of salt, slice some tomatoes, slice some cucumber, some red onion just to give it a bit of freshness. So just make little falafels like this. They just smell amazing. Let's make our tahini dressing. Let's get in some tomatoes, cucumbers, some falafels. Drizzle some of this lovely dressing. All you need to do is roll it up and you've got a delicious lunch for your family.
Hi, welcome back. Now, it seems that these days no Christmas season would be complete without an argument over whether the political correctness brigade is destroying Christmas.
Yeah, or even a theological argument over whether Christmas is Christian. Some people think it's pagan.
Oh, yeah, well, James Standish didn't go there in this next segment. Let's see what he did say, though.
Okay, but straight after that, we'll see another segment with Trafford Fisher on how to achieve a long and healthy marriage.
Around this time of year, when you look in at some of the Christian media, the story keeps coming up. There's a war on Christmas, and it's not the Grinch. It's not even James Standish here.
Well, happy holidays, Ken. I should say that right there.
Happy holidays. It's political correctness, they say, is killing Christmas. Is this a fair enough claim?
Well, this is the background for it, and that is that, particularly in the US, a number of stores have gone away from saying Merry Christmas. They say Merry Christmas in the US, not Happy Christmas, incidentally. And they've replaced it with Happy Holidays.
Because this covers Hanukkah, it's non-religious.
And the New Year's and so forth. It's non-religious. Yep. And the idea is, you know, maybe 90% of Americans celebrate Christmas, something along those lines, at least 10% who don't. Maybe this is offensive, so let's get away from this. So the claim is, here we are in a predominantly Christian country, whether it's the United States or Australia, etc., and people are not explicitly embracing Christmas like they used to. Some towns don't have manger scenes like they used to. Some schools will put in non-Christian Christmas songs or exclude it, and this is a major problem, and it's offensive. So
James, this happens in Australia. A shopping centre in Australia may or may not decide to have a traditional nativity scene displayed in their shopping centre. is that discrimination? Is that persecution against Christians to refuse that
sure,
nativity scene?
I would never say it's persecution. You and I both know I've seen real persecution, and it's not having a manger scene or not. And in fact, we all know Christmas actually isn't the date that Christ was born anyway.
Is it the thin edge of the wedge?
And shopping is not actually the center of Christmas to begin with.
Yeah.
I think, though, symbols do matter.
Yeah.
And it's fair enough for Christians to say, hey, when our holiday comes along, the biggest holiday of the year in the most Christians' calendar, it's kind of nice to see in society in general that it's respected and celebrated. I grew up in Malaysia, Kent, on a little island called Penang, and we celebrated every holiday you can imagine. We had Chinese New Year, and we celebrated with we did American Thanksgiving, we did Christmas, we did Hari Raya, which is the end of fasting for Muslims.
Oh, okay.
We did the Hindu Festival of Lights.
Oh, Diwali, yeah.
That's right. We enjoyed all of them, and we went for it. And so did the culture in general. There was a really nice sort of embrace. I think the answer to having a diverse society isn't to sort of wipe out one holiday or the next. It's to embrace them all. There's room in Australia for Diwali. There's room in Australia for Chinese New Year. There's room for the end of fasting, for the Muslim end of fasting, and surely there's got to still be room for publicly acknowledging wherever we are Christmas and of course the Happy New Year.
Is there a place, let's say public school, for example, where students want to express, give out Christmas cards with religious messages? Is this an area that we should be concerned about if that's discouraged?
Well, I think if it's discouraged, we should be. The speech by students should be protected, generally speaking, unless it's innately offensive, using sort of four-letter words and what have you. But outside of that, if kids want to express that they're proud to be Jewish around Hanukkah or and other times of the year, good on them. Good on them. My wife taught at a Christian school, and does now again, but we used to do Hanukkah there because it's just interesting. It's a beautiful story. It's an inspiring story. Why curtail people's expression of who they are? And part of who you are is your faith.
Yeah.
And part of your faith is saying, great, it's Christmas time. I'm thankful for that. And you know what? I want to share the Christmas spirit. Nothing wrong with doing that.
There you go. Thanks so much for your insights, James.
It's a pleasure, and Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to you. Thank you for watching.
Well, joining us now is our family life educator, Trafford Fisher. Good to see you, Traff.
Hi. Thank you, Danielle.
Now, today we're talking about long marriage, which is a bit against the norm these days.
Yes and no.
Unfortunately.
Look, yeah, true. Sadly, as we know, some marriages don't make it, but there are some who do, and for the long term. And I was just reading recently about a couple. They have just celebrated their 81st wedding anniversary. I brought you a photo of this. I think this is pretty special. Check them out, aren't they fabulous? And she was 17 when she ran off with John, and John was this 21-year-old, and he had this Ford car. They mentioned that they used to take kids around in, and they fell in love. Well, they got 5 children. I think they got 14 grandchildren and 17 great-grandchildren. But aren't they fabulous? And I think to be married for 81 years.
81 years.
Very, very special.
Fantastic.
So they've actually got a lot of incredible memories. But their daughter, who I guess must be in her 80s, we're not sure, her name was her name Renee.
Renee.
And she said they had this incredible capacity to face life as it comes, which I think is just brilliant. So they obviously some kind of resilience, tenacity about life. They face it as it comes. They were able to deal with it. It was interesting. John says that I think he was asked in some interview, okay, so what's your secret?
Yeah,
and he says,
that's the obvious question, I guess, isn't it?
Well, he said,
look,
it's unconditional love and understanding.
What a great tip.
And the other he said compromise, but his fun little line, he says, let your wife be the boss.
That's
so
right.
there are gentlemen who are watching
happy wife,
today.
Happy life.
Yeah, let your wife be the boss. But look, I thought it was just fabulous. And their granddaughter said they are true beacons. Now, what a fabulous image of this, true beacons who somehow, certainly to the granddaughter, I know the image came to mind, of course, is a lighthouse. Here's this solid lighthouse against the storms, and they're shining this light. I think that's fabulous. So,
what a great example. I mean, 81 years, they're certainly speaking for what they stand for.
Imagine the memories that they share together.
Incredible.
And they actually ran away to get married.
What a beautiful story.
It's a great story. But if only we could copy that. And I think this unconditional love and understanding that was a part of their marriage, if we could make that a part of ours, that we love in spite of, regardless, we stay in love and we nurture that love and keep it alive and we become beacons. I think it's just a fabulous image. It's great.
It is fabulous. And I'm sure there's some lovely communication that happens within that context of unconditional love too, which is really important.
They would. I think they would have to have done a lot of really neat things that have allowed them to sustain that journey. But that unconditional love and understanding where they've been able to negotiate, work together, I think they're my heroes. I think they're fabulous.
Yeah, well, great heroes to have by the sound of it, Travis.
Terrific. Yeah.
Thanks for being with us.
Pleasure.
Well, unconditional love and resilience, yeah, I get that, but let your wife be the boss? Come on, really?
Hey. They've been married for 81 years, Ken. I think they should know what they're talking about.
Yeah, well, look, he must have been joking, surely.
No.
Just a joke. just joking.
I think it's probably time for an ad break now. We'll be back in a sec. Father, I can't connect the dots through the little that I understand. What words can I say to reach you? How can I know that you are there, listening, hearing, caring? My words are broken, weak, and powerless. But I know your power is limitless. What can I say?
So you think you've got your future all planned out, right? Or maybe you're not sure yet what you want to do, who you want to be, but whatever path you choose to study, a great education matters. Because it doesn't just help you get a great job, it helps you prepare for what life can throw at you and live a great life. Avondale. It's education designed for life.
Hi, welcome back. Now, let's get our Christmassy vibe back again with this interview with Richard Maygraith, a jazz saxophonist who played a Christmas carol for us right here in the studio.
Oh, it was awesome, Dora.
Yeah.
It was a real InFocus highlight for me. So how about we say goodbye and Happy Christmas to you all right now and here.
Yeah.
And after the interview, we'll let Richard play out this week's episode.
Sounds like a plan. See you next week.
God bless. Well, if there's one thing that's controversial amongst church circles, it's music. Ever heard of the worship wars? Well, here's, well, no, you're not really in the worship wars, are you, Richard Maygraith?
No.
No. You've left the worship wars because you're out there playing your saxophone in clubs and pubs and stuff, and goodness me, why? How? Please explain.
Yeah, short answer is that God's given me this gift to be able to play jazz, to be able to improvise, to be able to play the saxophone. So that's how I believe He wants me to glorify Him.
Is that a challenging thing spiritually? I mean, in those environments, that kind of music which has, people tell you jazz has its roots in, sort of strip clubs and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, well, jazz was, was it?
Prostitute's perfume, I think, jasmine,
There's a few different meanings for where that word came from. But yes, lots of Christians have said that in the past. Don't hear that much anymore. But yeah, it's what God's given me to do, so that's what I do.
One interesting thing you have done, Richard, is this sort of jam church idea. You've had, 30, 40 people packing themselves into your home, having church there. How did that come about?
Well, basically, as I grew as a Christian and as a musician, I realised that our current church culture is pretty much an anathema to creative people.
How so?
Worship music is usually pretty uncreative.
A bit formula. It's got to be easy to sing along with.
Exactly.
I mean, part of how it works.
Usually for creative people or creative musicians, it's it's a real turn-off.
Bit too predictable.
Yeah. And just genuine relating is actually hard to come across in many churches. So I believe God wanted me to start basically a parachurch. So something alongside the established church, the established local church that I was going to at the time. We would meet once every 2 months in our lounge room at home. And this really offered an opportunity to musicians who are very often single people or who are away from their families, or there's often
isolated.
a lot of isolation in musicians because they dedicate so many hours to their music and so on. Anyway, it became like a family.
and we'd have a jam, we'd have a Bible reading, I'd give a talk, or a friend of mine or friends of mine would give a talk, and we'd have prayer, and we'd just talk about the different issues that come up in the music industry and how we can support one another in that, and also just the encouragement to go to your local church, even though you might not like the music there or it might not be a cup of tea, just be a part of it.
Surprise, surprise, there's more to life than music.
That's right. Yeah.
Wow.
And your identity is not found in your music.
So this wasn't just a whim that sort of crossed your mind one lazy afternoon. You actually went and studied theology, studied ministry, and really were commissioned really to follow this path of reaching musicians through music.
Absolutely, and that really came through 12 years or so of when I became a Christian and I was a musician, and trying to navigate this really strange cultural path of Christian work or culture and music or secular work, and never the twain shall meet, it seemed. Yeah.
So when you are like playing in clubs, because you do still play in clubs and lots of live venues, people are drinking, people go there for all sorts of motivations, not all of them particularly savoury. How do you keep your spiritual life strong, your relationship with with God strong? How do you resist temptation? I mean, is it a negative atmosphere sometimes?
It can be, but I find pretty much anywhere in this world it can be a negative atmosphere. Just riding my motorbike coming here, there's all kinds of road rage and things that happen, so you don't have to go to a club to find that. I think, the classic things are just keeping in the Word, keeping in prayer, having people who you can really genuinely fellowship with is what's key.
But I think accountability sort of built into those close relationships.
Yeah, I think so. When you're doing what you do, just do it really well. Don't be slapdash. Do it excellently.
When you say that though, Richard, I mean there is a thing with this sort of virtuosity. I'm here to show, I know how to do all these trills and runs, and I have these incredible skills, and I know all the arpeggios and all the musos are in the crowd going, yeah, man, that guy's got it. But what about glorifying God? Like where's that sort of balance between excellence, as you're talking about, and actually glorifying God rather than yourself? Is it difficult?
I suppose yes, it can be difficult. However, I do try to commit every performance to the Lord Jesus, and I do pray to Him, and I just say before I get on stage, this is for you, Lord. Everything I do, may it be for your glory. And that's what you do. You don't have to be singing or even talking about Jesus on the mic to be glorifying Him. I think people sense there's something going on when you do something really well, and when you honour people on the stage too, and you listen to their performance. There's something that we came up with a few years ago. We had a band called Salah, which was a 10-piece Christian ensemble, and we toured Turkey and Australia and preaching the gospel through music. And we had a bit of a saying, and that was other person-centred playing.
Yeah.
So the temptation in our selfish nature is to go for self-centred playing.
Sure.
But when Jesus becomes Lord of your life and you want to glorify Him, it becomes about other people. So we had this basically a mantra, which was other person-centred. So whatever you're doing, you're actually focusing on the other people in your ensemble. And that takes the pressure off yourself, and it takes the competition away, which there can often be.
Yeah.
And it means that the audience can also enjoy what you're putting out, and they can really become a part of it too, and see that it's not all about me.
Yeah. Okay, so if I can take you back to some of this more ministry-focused stuff you've been doing in your home and elsewhere, is this sort of a bit of a laugh and a bit of fun, hey, we're doing Christian Jam, or have you actually seen this have some sort of spiritual impact on people who are participating?
We have, praise God. There has been fruit. One fellow bass player I think of, he'd been brought up in Pentecostal circles, and he said to me once, he said, you know what, I knew that Jesus was Lord and I knew we should worship Him, but I just never knew why. I didn't quite get it, basically. In another way, I think he didn't actually understand the gospel.
Wow.
And so the focus was always to have good teaching from the Bible, and we had these things called worductions, where someone would read from the Bible or speak, or kind of do a mixture of singing and speaking, or shout, or whatever the passage dictated. Apocalyptic literature is great for this.
For shouting, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'd have musicians just responding however they felt led.
In an improvised sort of way.
Yeah, and in an other person-centred way too. And
so
this
free jazz worship.
Yeah. It's kind of a mixture of all different sorts of things. And I'll never forget, we had a time once in our lounge room, we had 4 different keyboard players. There was a guy on our old Kauai piano, someone on a beautiful new keyboard, someone on an old Kauai 70s organ, and someone on some other keyboard, I can't even remember. But we had that, and a whole rhythm section, had someone on a horn. And we didn't record any of these things, so I can't refer to a website or anything, but they were really special times. And when God's word goes out, it just accomplishes, well, we know it accomplishes what he desires. And I think this can happen in a really special way, in a creative context. And I don't think in many ways our Western church experience has embraced the arts in a way that it could. There's a lot more exploration we can do.
And I mean, you say the word's going out, but you're also going out. And just quickly as we finish, you're heading for Europe.
That's right.
For more music ministry with migrants and artists and people over there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, God's, we believe, sending us to Berlin. We're going with ECM, and we're going to be in an area that's got heaps of refugees, migrants, creative people, musicians.
It's a real centre for jazz, isn't it, Billy?
It is. It's like New York of Europe. Everyone's there. Whatever you're into, it's there. And there's a massive need for the gospel to go out.
Incredible. Hey, well, God bless your ministry as you go out. It's going to be really exciting to see how that works out. And you have brought your horn in.
I have.
And Richard Maygraith will play an improvised, jazzed up version of O Come, Emmanuel. Is that right?
That's the one.
Excellent.